All right, so moving on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my fight prediction for the co-main event of UFC 308 between Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. So this will be a huge middleweight fight taking place in the co-main event of UFC 308 that could have some middleweight championship implications. For some point in 2025, the winner could receive a title shot. We're going to see who wants it more between Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev in the co-main event of UFC 308. So these are the following storylines I have heading into this fight. So like I just mentioned a few moments ago, the winner of this fight will possibly get a title shot in the calendar year 2025. Based on how the middleweight division is playing out, Israel Adesanya, following his loss against Dricus du Plessis, is probably heading to the back of the line in this division. Possibly, we will probably see Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland fight each other in the beginning part of 2025 from a rematch that we saw earlier this year, where Dricus du Plessis took the middleweight title from Sean Strickland. So while that happens, I think the winner of this fight between Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker can find themselves in position to get a title opportunity at this division later on in 2025. Now, next storyline is Khamzat Chimaev ready for this big-time opportunity against Robert Whittaker? Now, Khamzat Chimaev has not fought since UFC 294 when he fought Kamaru Usman on a 12-day notice in the co-main event of UFC 294. This is also a Kamaru Usman who, once upon a time, was the king of the welterweight division, moved up to the middleweight division, and fought Khamzat Chimaev on a 12-day notice and basically went the distance with Khamzat Chimaev. I still feel like, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if there was at least 2 more rounds in that fight, Khamzat Chimaev would have been in a world of trouble because the momentum was changing in favor of Kamaru Usman as he was finding his footing as that fight went on. But as I digress, even though Khamzat Chimaev got the victory, he's only fought 3 times since April 2022, and he has not fought 1 time this year in the calendar year 2024. So when you think about Khamzat Chimaev, I've already said this in the past. He was supposed to be everything that Dricus du Plessis has turned out to be in the middleweight division. That being the king, the dominator, and the ruler of this division. And Khamzat Chimaev hasn't done it yet. I mean, he was once upon a time one of the hottest prospects in the UFC, and due to the fact of travel issues and sickness, have kept Khamzat Chimaev away from the UFC, only fighting 3 times since April 2022. So we're going to see if he's ready for this big-time fight, the biggest fight of his career, against Robert Whittaker in the co-main event of UFC 308. Now, final storyline is, can Robert Whittaker climb back to the top of the mountain and climb up the ladder one more time in this middleweight division? We all know that Robert Whittaker is a former undisputed middleweight champion in the UFC. We're starting to see a different side of Robert Whittaker. He's gotten hot since he's been knocked out against Dricus du Plessis in springtime of 2023. He has not looked back. He's been picking up some big time wins and finds himself in a good position to get a championship opportunity if he's successful against Khamzat Chimaev. So we're going to see what these fighters are going to bring to the table for the co-main event of UFC 308. For enough of the storylines, let's get into the tail of the tape. So my tail of the tape here, you have Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev is 13-0. He has 6 victories come away of knockout, 5 victories come away of submission. Currently the 12th ranked contender in the middleweight division. Currently stands at 6'2" and has a reach advantage of 75 inches. Now I'm looking at Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker is 27-7, 27 victories, 7 losses. 11 victories come away of knockout, 5 submission victories. Currently ranked as the 3rd contender in the middleweight division. Currently stands at 6 foot tall and has a reach advantage of 73 inches. So the height and the reach advantage goes in favor of Khamzat Chimaev for this fight. That's going to be something to look forward to because both of these guys can throw some strikes. We're going to see if Khamzat Chimaev can use that in his favor, the height and the reach advantage for this big-time fight. So these are the following game plans that I have for these fighters to follow if they want to walk out of the co-main event at UFC 308 with a big-time win in this middleweight division. Starting off with Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I do believe that it's important for Khamzat Chimaev to out-wrestle Robert Whittaker in this fight. Now, I think it's best for Khamzat Chimaev to take Robert Whittaker to the ground and shoot for a lot of takedowns. Khamzat Chimaev actually has a takedown accuracy of takedowns landed of 46.15% of takedowns that he shoots for does land accurately. I think if he can get ground control on Robert Whittaker and work on top, on the mount, landing strikes in the mount while having mount control on Robert Whittaker, that could possibly lead to Khamzat Chimaev wowing the judge if it goes to the distance, and possibly getting Robert Whittaker hurt in the fight and stunning him with some strikes if he can land that on top. So I think that's a huge game plan for Khamzat Chimaev to follow. Next, speaking of the ground, I just said for Khamzat Chimaev to take him to the ground. While he's got Robert Whittaker on the ground, if he could get him there with some takedowns, he's got to get ground. He's got to get ground. While he's got ground control, he's got to get back control. And I think that's best for Khamzat Chimaev to get back control if he's already has Robert Whittaker on the ground, because if you go back and look at Khamzat Chimaev's previous opponents and look at the tape, his previous opponents don't do well when Khamzat Chimaev is on. They have Khamzat Chimaev on their back, and they're struggling trying to get control on the ground. And I believe he had over 2 minutes of back control on Kamaru Usman when his last outing at UFC 294 when he fought Kamaru Usman, and he had a lot of success keeping Kamaru Usman grounded a lot in that fight. Having back control for 2 minutes, I think that's going to be really important. If he could do that against Kamaru Usman, can you imagine if he could do that against Robert Whittaker? So that's something to look forward to for this fight. Now, last but not least, I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to have to use his finishing instincts. That's the reason why he was known as a hot commodity, one of the hottest prospects that the UFC had to offer. If he sees an opening on Robert Whittaker at any point in this fight, he's got to be he's got to be a shark that smells blood in the water and go for the attack and use those finishing instincts. Because if he could do that, if he sees that Robert Whittaker could be put away in pure seconds, pure moments, whether that's landing strikes, possibly knocking out Robert Whittaker, or if he's got him on the ground and got him vulnerable, shoot for some submissions to possibly get a submission victory against Robert Whittaker. He's got to do it because Robert Whittaker is a hard guy to beat. And he's on a really good run right now in the middleweight division. So those are the following 3 game plans that I have for Khamzat Chimaev to follow in the co-main event of UFC 308. Now, let's start off with Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker's got to take Khamzat Chimaev to the deep waters and drown him. Now, Robert Whittaker is a former undisputed middleweight champion. He's been in there with some top-notch guys in this octagon at the middleweight division with guys like Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis, Paulo Costa, and several others. Khamzat Chimaev has actually never fought in a 5-round fight in his UFC career thus far. I think if he could get him to the deep waters, tire him out, something that I saw Khamzat Chimaev really, I keep going back to this fight that he had against Kamaru Usman. But I've seen a lot of flaws in Khamzat Chimaev's game, because if you're getting tired and winning against a guy that took this fight on a 12-day notice, you're going into a 5-round fight for the first time in your UFC career. So I think if he could take him to the deep waters and drown him, if the fight goes on, I think the longer the fight goes on, the more it has to favor Robert Whittaker because he has the experience. He's been in these big-time moments before against an inexperienced guy, Khamzat Chimaev, who hasn't been. Now, next, Robert Whittaker's got stuff to take downs. Now, Khamzat Chimaev, I just mentioned, is a good wrestler and he's going to shoot for a lot of takedowns. So if Robert Whittaker could shut down a game plan that Khamzat Chimaev is going to use in his arsenal, in his toolbox, shooting for a lot of takedowns, I think that with Khamzat Chimaev possibly trying to take this fight to the ground a lot, Robert Whittaker can stuff a lot of takedowns and force Khamzat Chimaev to fight standing up with striking-wise. That could be a benefit for him as this fight goes on and possibly help him get a victory in the co-main event of UFC 308. Now, last but not least, I think it's important for Robert Whittaker to win the striking battle. Now, Robert Whittaker's bread and butter is in the striking department. His bread and butter is landing those significant strikes and hurting his opponents, stunning his opponents, and possibly opening the door for him to get a knockout victory. If he could do that against Khamzat Chimaev, those 3 following game plans, I do believe that is Robert Whittaker's game, and he has a good chance of winning this fight in the co-main event of UFC 308. But with that being said, this is another 50-50 fight here. I give Dana White and the UFC a lot of credit for putting together this one. I'm going to go with Robert Whittaker to win this fight by knockout in the third round against Khamzat Chimaev in the co-main event at UFC 308. Now, for bettors out there, Robert Whittaker is going to be the underdog in this fight. I think that's a good bet to take with Robert Whittaker for the money line. But I think Robert Whittaker is going to knock out Khamzat Chimaev in the third round because I feel like this is a bad matchup on paper for Khamzat Chimaev. If Khamzat Chimaev cannot take the fight to the ground, gain ground control, and land strikes on top in the mount position, I think this is a bad fight for him, and I don't see him winning this fight. If they're going blow for blow, standing up, striking, I think Robert Whittaker, this is his world. This is a great matchup for him. If this fight doesn't go to the ground, I think Robert Whittaker can get the job done, landing the significant strikes, hurting Khamzat Chimaev. And like I said earlier, the longer the fight goes on, the more it has to favor Robert Whittaker because he has that experience. He's a former middleweight champion in his own right. Khamzat Chimaev has never been to the deep waters, the championship rounds, even though this is not a title fight. He's never been to the fourth round or fifth round in his MMA career. And him being off, having so much time off since UFC 294, with Robert Whittaker on a hot streak right now in this middleweight division, I think this is a bad matchup for Khamzat Chimaev. I'm going with Robert Whittaker to pick up the win and possibly see himself getting a title opportunity at some point in 2025. But that is my fight prediction between Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev.